The final HBCU rankings are out. FAMU is at the top, which is expected. But after that, it gets a little bit weird. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege and /LockedOn. And when you win your first $5 moneyline bet, if you're new to FanDuel, then you will get $150 back in bonus bets. So that's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more. We'll wrap up today's episode with a little bit of transfer portal talk. Harold Blood has gone from Southern to Mississippi Valley State. Then you also have Tennessee State getting a new quarterback from the University of Memphis. However, prior to that, FAMU is number one in the HBCU final rankings. And I don't think that's really a surprise. But where everybody else falls and what is the top seven, I feel the need to expand it, right? But where everybody else falls in the top seven, I think that's where things get interesting. I think that's where we were really trying to see who was going to be where. So, number one, FAMU. Cool. Clear and obvious. They're the champions. They only lost to South Florida this year. They went into the Celebration Bowl, were victorious. They handled their business in every single way. In the FCS polls, the Rattlers were 5 at the end of the season. They'll likely be somewhere between 3 to 6, right? Just giving 3 to 7. Let's just give a little bit of range for somebody in the playoffs to maybe jump up. Haven't been paying all the way attention to the FCS playoffs, but maybe somebody who was ahead of them or behind them had a really deep run and then they end up jumping, right? So let's just give them room, 3 to 7 in a little 2 up, 2 down type of situation. But you're looking at a top 10 team in the FCS in 2023. So you add all of that in, even if they had lost the Celebration Bowl, you might have seen them at number one, but you probably would have seen them at number 2. So who is number 2, though? Because if the Rattlers are 1, who is 2? That's North Carolina Central. And then I'm just going to read them off here between 2 to 7. You have Central, then you have Prairie View, then Alcorn, then Howard, then Jackson State, and Alabama State. I'm not a fan of these rankings, right? North Carolina Central at 2, I'm okay with because they had a lot of big-time out-of-conference games that they came up victorious in. Even though they lost to Howard, they performed well enough to make it into the playoffs. I don't know. Maybe you're holding up what they did early in the season with the games against Elon, with the games against Campbell. Maybe you're using that and saying this is one of the 2 best teams in black college football. And they just got on that day against Howard, which I understand. That's okay. But Howard at 5 is not okay because I would use the argument that nobody ahead of them really had a great out-of-conference showing. And if you want to use the idea that Central just got by Howard, then I would say that Howard just got by South Carolina State. I would say that loss should not be impactful enough to move them down to 5. Frankly, I was expecting them at 3, if not 2. I expected it to go FAMU at 1, then 2 and 3 to be some sort of combination of North Carolina Central and Howard. I really don't like PV being the second team in the SWAC. Frankly, I don't think that they're better than Alabama State. That's my second best team in the conference, and for what I've seen, right? If I did this, I probably would have had PV on the outside looking in of the top 5. I probably would have had them at 6, to be honest. I probably would have had them at 6. Because even if you want to do the whole comparison to FAMU, they got smashed by FAMU twice. Howard ain't get done like that. Howard didn't get done like that. PV won their division, yes, but Howard won their conference. So are we going by accomplishments? Are we going by how they look throughout the season? Or what are we going by? Because, I wasn't a huge fan of what Howard put on the field early in their MEAC schedule. But as the MEAC schedule went on, they found a groove, and it showed that they were the better. I just thought they were better, right? And the same thing with Alcorn. I won't fight Alcorn as much because PV won the head-to-head battle. But when I look team for team, I think the quarterback's better at Alcorn. I think that the running back is better than the running back duo, right? So I think that Jarvion Howard, is better than the combination of Johnson and Ahmad. Like, I think that the defensive line is better. Like, I just enjoy watching Alcorn more than I enjoy watching Prairie View, in a sense that I just think they're better, right? But to me, Alabama State, which has a better record, but what hurt the East is that Bama State lost to PV in the last game, and then Jackson State lost to Alcorn in the last game. So that knocks them down. But for my money, I thought that Alabama State was the second best team, right? And I really don't like Alabama State being below Jackson State. And I saw the reasoning for it. See, Becton, who does the rankings, he mentioned how I know that Alabama State beat Jackson State, but Alabama State lost to Miles. That was so long ago. We can't hold that. We can't hold that one D2 loss against Bama State all year long. The quarterback wasn't even a quarterback then, right? I'm pretty sure D. Davis was the quarterback at that time, and they benched him, right? And even that, there was a certain flow that whether it was Stewart or if it was Davis, that Alabama State just wasn't in the beginning of the season. They hit their stride about halfway through. I thought that their game against FAMU was good. They beat Jackson State. Really, all of this should go out the window when you beat Jackson State. Jackson State doesn't really have, in my opinion, they don't have a quality win on their schedule this year. And I don't say that to be disrespectful, but once we get into comparisons, that's when these things start to matter, right? Like I said this in evaluating CC Taylor's year. Cool. Then I leave it alone. That's not something I'm going to continue to regurgitate. But if we're talking about teams that are close and we get to splitting hairs, then you best believe strength of schedule should be something that matters. You best believe that strength of victory, screw the strength of schedule, because they both lost to FAMU. They both beat Southern, right? Your strength of victory, who are you beating? And you might say Alabama State ain't beat nobody either, but they beat Jackson State. Period. So I had to expand this to a top 7 because I really feel like those are the teams that are in the mix. Obviously, FAMU is one, but then as you go down to North Carolina Central, PV, Alcorn, Howard, Jackson State, Bama State, they're not interchangeable. I probably would take North Carolina Central out of that grouping. But really, once you get into the SWAC team specifically, PV, Alcorn, Jackson State, Bama State, they are interchangeable. They really are. I'm not a fan, though. There's certain things that I value higher. That head-to-head victory, if the head-to-head victory is enough for PV to be over Alcorn, then it should be enough for Bama State to be over Howard. That's my personal opinion on it. Now, as we move forward, I'm going to do something I typically don't do, and that's look at recruiting. Or I'm not going to say I typically don't do it because we're going to do it a lot next week too, probably. But we're going to look at recruiting, and we're going to look at a new quarterback who just made it to Tennessee State, because I know that they're looking for him to be the future, but most importantly, they're looking at him for him to be the stability in next year's season that they didn't have in this past season. And we'll look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. And listen, We're going to have Saturday games for football yet again, right? So I'm going to have to tell them put the game on when I go to this little Christmas party on Saturday. Put football on. But in all seriousness, you're going to have football on Saturday. You're going to have football on Sunday. You're going to have football on Monday. There's a lot of chances for you to make money. There's a lot of opportunities. And then you have basketball in there. You have hockey in there, right? There's so many opportunities for you to make a little bit of bread. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And all you have to do is kind of just feel like you know what you're talking about. What's going to be the over-under? Is this team going to lose by maybe the spread 10.5, right? Can they cover it? It's just things that simple. FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's the place to be, because if you're new to FanDuel and you place a $5 money line bet and win, you get $150 back in bonus bets. You heard me right. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and you'll get $150 back in bonus bets if you win a $5 money line and are new to FanDuel. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 stream live podcast. I checked it out around 3 p.m. today, and they were playing Locked On NFL. Maybe I'll check it out after this to see who they're playing now. Now, as we move forward, speaking of playing now, you're seeing Tevin Carter transfer to Tennessee State for an opportunity to play now. He just came over from the University of Memphis, and this is one that I'm really interested in. And if you know me, you know I'm not huge on the recruiting side of things, right? Like, we'll touch on it. I think it's important to report, but it's not something that I'm going to overly consume myself with. That's just not my forte, right? You have other people who recruiting is their thing, like in and out. They love recruiting. That's not so much me. There's very few recruiting actions that really get me excited. And this is one of them for whatever reason, right? So former 4-star quarterback I think he's out of Memphis. I think he might be from Memphis, Tennessee. So he went to University of Memphis. Now he came over to Nashville and he's going to Tennessee State. Let's look at Tevin Carter. So the reason I think this is big is because last year there was no sort of stability. There was no sort of confidence in the quarterback room from what I've seen from the outside looking in, right? You had Devion Bryant and you had Draylon Ellis, both of which Ellis is a grad student, so he should be gone. And then Bryant is a redshirt senior, so he also should be gone. But there was no real stability, in my opinion, because you just kept going back and forth, back and forth. And I don't know if that really helped either of those players because it was a limited rhythm, right? You probably didn't feel confident to make mistakes. So you're trying to play this super safe brand of football. It's just not fair to the psyche. And I don't think that it allowed us to see the best version of either player because they know that they're one, maybe two wrong plays away from being taken out. I wouldn't want to operate like that. Imagine if I was like, hey, you're one or two stumbles away from losing this podcast. I'd be so tight. I probably wouldn't make a stumble, but I also wouldn't give you the highlights. So that's the way my mind thinks of it. If you have a player who knows that any low light could immediately get them taken out, you're probably going to be very even. You're probably going to be very even, but you're not going to have many highs. So that's the way that I think of it. That's probably not going to be the case when you're looking at Tevin Carter. Now, as is the case with a lot of quarterbacks who transfer and a lot of players who transfer as well from the FBS to the FCS level, and specifically with the HBCUs, that's what I see. I'm not going to speak for all FCS schools, but when I see a lot of FBS to HBCU transfers, it's players who haven't played a lot. It just is, right? Now, you have some JUCO guys, you have some other FCS guys, and they have a little bit more experience. But for the most part, it appears to be players who don't have as much experience. For Carter, he redshirted his freshman year, which was 2022. And then he ended up playing for he threw 5 passes in 2023. So he barely played. He does have a touchdown, and it was supposed to be a bomb, right, against South Florida. So he has a little bit of experience. But overall, this guy is going to be probably very rusty. I would assume so. I would assume it's going to take him a while to get acclimated. Yes, he's going to have spring reps if he's the quarterback that's just they're just going to hand him the reins, right? But game reps and practice reps aren't the same, and you need game reps 9 times out of 10. So I don't think that his impact will be instantaneous, but I do really wonder if you'll be able to see the 4-star ability. You could be like D. Davis. D. Davis didn't play much at Auburn. Came to Alabama State, wasn't that good. Ended up getting his spot taken. Now people think that Damon Stewart is going to be the quarterback of the future. You might see D. Davis transfer again. I haven't heard his name, which is kind of surprising, but neither here nor there. But you're looking at Tevin Carter, who I think might take a little bit to get into the groove because he just hasn't played football since 2021. He just hasn't played much. In 2022, he redshirted. 2023, he barely played. Now you're going into 2024. That's nearly 3 years away from the game as far as getting real game action at a frequent pace. But when you look at him, I like the size. 6'3", 230 pounds coming out of high school, right? I looked at his bio on the University of Memphis, his freshman year, his true freshman year. He was 6'3", 230. To put this into a little bit of context, Josh Allen is 237, the quarterback Josh Allen, right? And I don't know how much Bills football you watch. I don't know who your fan is, who you're a fan of, but we've seen Josh Allen play. We've seen the hits that he takes. We've seen the hits that he delivers. The reason he's able to play that way is because the size that he has. He's going to be able to absorb contact, and that's going to be very interesting if Carter is to use his legs, right? Like I've seen him in high school. I don't even know what he's going to be in college, but whatever, I know that he'll be able to absorb hits. When he needs to run, he's not going to be frail. At least he shouldn't be, right? So this is a very interesting thing. And one last layer of the intrigue for me is Eddie George is coming off of his best season. You get a quarterback, and if he hits with this quarterback, that's the important thing. Eddie George is coming off his best season, and if he hits with this quarterback, he could improve on that. And now we're going to see the ball rolling where Tennessee State goes from feeling like they're a championship contender midway through the season to feeling like they're a championship contender at the end of the season and actually being a championship contender. And now that's when you see the recruiting start to get a lot better. So that's what will be very interesting to me. I know that's very forward thinking, but we're talking about recruits. Why wouldn't we be forward thinking? Now, as we move forward, that's a lot of forward and there's a lot of varies. But as we progress with today's episode of Locked On HBCU, you have Harold Blood. Harold Blood, the former Southern Jaguar, is now with Mississippi Valley State, and he should be an immediate starter. But is the bar really that high? We'll look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege and post your job for free, right? Let's say you're a small business owner. What is your excuse for not using LinkedIn? You have a job. If you don't have a job opening, that's it. Okay. But if you have a job opening, no matter the department, go find a LinkedIn profile of a person that fits you, right? Because every team needs to make sure that they have good culture. Every team needs to make sure that they have good players in each room, whether that's the wide receiver room, offensive line room, the linebacker room, whatever it is. It's not just about one person. It's not just about the quarterback. And small businesses are the same. You need to make sure you have good people on the floor. You need to make sure you have good customer service. You need to make sure you have good HR. You need everything to be in order. In order to do that, all you have to do is go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. You can post your job for free with the purple hashtag hiring frame. Go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day and making it all the way to segment 3. Thank you 2 times for that. Now, Harold Blood should be the immediate starter for Mississippi Valley State. And we have a little bit of an inner SWAC transfer here. But let's get it out the way. I'm not a big fan of Harold Blood. I'm not a big fan of Blood. But I do feel like he should be an improvement for Mississippi Valley State. I say that because I'm about to say some things, and I don't everydayers, you know how I feel. I come on here and I don't really sugarcoat it often, right? Every now and then, but I don't really sugarcoat it often. You know, if I'm not seeing it with a player, I'm going to tell you, I'm not seeing it with this guy. And then when something changes, I'm not, and I mean something like this changing, such as him changing team. Now, if he gets better, I'm going to acknowledge that he gets better. But him going from Southern to Mississippi Valley State, I'm not going to sit here and just, you know, I ain't gonna say lie, but like say something that I don't really believe just in the name of being positive for Mississippi Valley State. I think that he's an immediate impact. No, what's the word I'm trying to use? An immediate improvement. There we go. He's an immediate improvement over what you had, but the bar is low. It's way easier to step over that bar that the past quarterbacks have set than to play limbo with it, right? Because Mississippi Valley State was last in points, and they were last in passing yards. Not just this year, but also last year. So it's at a point where you don't get good quarterback play. You got the number one JUCO quarterback, Jalen Jones. Nothing came from it. Nothing came from it. And this isn't to say that Harold Blood is great, but Harold Blood was the sixth leading passer in yards per game in 2023. He was able to lead. He played every game except for the Bayou Classic, right? So with Southern being the fourth best passing attack, mind you, some of those guys who have better passing yards per game, they didn't play the whole game or the whole season. Blood was able to lead the Jaguars to the fourth best passing attack in the conference yardage-wise. That's not something to scoff at. Mississippi Valley was last. Mississippi Valley was 12th. So trust me, they would love to improve to a fourth. They would love to improve to an eighth. They haven't seen that over the last 2 years. It's been a struggle. I think that Harold Blood can come in and make things better. When I looked at Southern, I didn't look at them as having great weapons. I didn't. I'm not going to go toe for toe with the weapons and see who's going to be there and whatnot. Hopefully you will want to get better. Obviously, there was other things wrong at Mississippi Valley State outside of just quarterback play. It'd be ignorant to think that they weren't. But I would think that Harold Blood can get you above last in the conference. So with that being said, that would make him an immediate starter for the team. So overall, I think that Mississippi Valley State fans should be excited about the decent sized improvement, right? I don't think that Harold Blood is straight garbage, right? Like I'm not saying he's just garbage, but he's average. You've had garbage. And now that you're moving up to average, things should be better for you. And hey, I understand. I've lost every game in the season before too when watching Texas Southern. So I get the desire to move up from average or move from bad to average and how exciting that could be. I just want to keep it real with where I stand on it. Not a huge fan of Harold Blood, but he should help this offense out in a decent sized way. Now, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. We went through a couple of transfer portal things. Tomorrow, we're going to look at if it's not Fred McNair at Texas Southern, because it very well could not be. If it's not Fred McNair at Texas Southern, then who? I have three coaches that I want to look at because my gut is telling me it's going to happen, but I still can't be confident. So let's look at some of our other options on tomorrow. In the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.